You are listening to Blue Please on WoW Radio for, I think, the second off last time, give or take. Let's have a look at the calendar. When's the last show going to be? Yep, you get 2 more shows on WoW Radio, and then I'll be moving over to cynicalbit.com, where you'll also get shows, and they'll sound exactly the same. In fact, if you're listening to the podcast, they'll sound quite a lot better. 128 kbps, folks. It's the way to go. Right. So, I've been relatively supportive of Blizz so far. Been making a lot of good decisions, but there is one that I do not believe is good at all. So, it's gonna be a theme of the rest of the show, this one. In certain ways. We shall have a look. Now, there's a post here that will be linked in the IRC channel. If you're not already there, go check it out. irc.quakenet.org, hash or pound WCU Radio. Click the chat button at the top of the screen on WCUradio.com. It's very easy to find this one. It's a sticky topic on dungeons and raids on the US World of Warcraft forums, and it's entitled Icecrown Citadel Raid Access Progression. Now, down the bottom of this thing is something that is a little bit distressing, and this has been confirmed by Valnoth, unfortunately. So, no, I don't love Valnoth anymore. Sorry. Quote, in the weeks and months after all 12 encounters are unlocked, additional attempts against the final 4 bosses encounters become available. This represents the Ashen Verdict growing more powerful and graining a stronger foothold. You know, they're bringing corn and everything. They start mixing oatmeal on the steps of the Icecrown. This represents the Ashen Verdict growing more powerful and gaining a stronger hut hold. Wow! Wow! I'm not drinking enough. Wow! I need to have something during the music break. To further help raids, Varian Rin and Garrosh Hellscream will begin to provide assistance by inspiring the armies attacking Icecrown Citadel. This is represented by an additional zone-wide spell effect applied to all players that will increase their hit points, damage dealt, and healing done. This effect will also increase in effectiveness over time. Players may opt out of the spell if they so wish. I'm not going to talk about the opting out, that's going to be part of the next segment, but I will talk about this buff. This buff is really stupid. Honestly, it is. Here's why. I keep going back to this analogy, but it's always so effective because learning works in roughly the same way, regardless of whether or not you're a child or an adult. And of course, there's some child psychologists, teachers, and professors and all that just yelling at me right now saying, no, Total Biscuit, you're wrong. Hear me out. So, the best way to learn in something like World of Warcraft for an activity that requires precision and, in some cases, perfection is practice. Yeah? You've got to understand the theory behind it. That's really important, initially. Like, no amount of practice is going to help you if you don't understand the theory. But once you understand the theory, it's about practice. It's like playing a musical instrument. It's like playing a particular piece, particular technical piece. I remember a long time ago, I used to play classical oboe, and I was actually quite good at it. Ended up passing the final grade of the music stuff that you get over here. Grade 8. Did a bit of diploma work on it as well. Used to play in bands and all sorts of things. Now, for these exams, you often had to do what was called a study, and studies were generally highly technical pieces that required precision, in many cases perfection, and it was practice makes perfect. You had to, of course, understand the theory behind it, but it required several months of practice to get it right, at least if it was a particularly difficult one. And you could fail, of course, if you made too many mistakes. And I would liken that to raiding. You fail if you make too many mistakes, you've got to understand the theory behind it, and it requires precision, perfection, and a lot of practice. And depending, of course, on how talented you are initially and how good you are at your class, or in this case your instrument, then that depends on the speed that you will learn. But if you understand the theory and you're good, then you will beat the encounter eventually. That's the way of it. Universal truth right there. Now, there are some people, of course, who will arguably never beat the encounter. But I think those people are pretty thin on the ground, to be honest. Everyone has the potential to beat encounters like this, honestly. And one has to ask, what are they being held back by? Well, let's have a look. What about gear? Are they being held back by gear? No, not really. Gear is really easy to get now. TOC can be cleared in under an hour, drops a bunch of 232 stuff. You can get 232 stuff from Triumph badges. You can earn Frost badges by doing daily quests. You can earn more Frost badges by simply going in there and defeating the first 4 bosses, which are let's be honest, up to Saurfang incredibly easy, and Saurfang's a mild bump in the road. There's no real excuse there. There's also craftables and all sorts of other places. PvP gear if you want. It's all perfectly functional. So, gear's kind of out the window as an excuse. Well, what about time? Well, looking at the current raids, let's just ignore Ulduar. I know, sad but true, ignoring Ulduar. Ulduar takes a lot of time, but TOC, again, can be done in under an hour. You've got Heroics that drop 232 stuff that can be done in under 15 minutes. You've got ICC, the first wing can be cleared in just over an hour, which provides you with, what? 8 high item level epics, plus, what, 8 frost badges? Quite a lot of badges. That's ignoring, of course, the fact that you get reputation as well, which will allow you to get upgraded rings. Again, very nice items. In terms of time, that's not too bad. And may I also point out, now that you can extend lockouts indefinitely, that time ceases to become a factor. If you are capable of raiding for at least an hour, you are capable of making progress, and you are capable of acquiring items. If you are not able to play for an hour straight, then I would suggest that MMOs are probably not a good bet. Why don't you try Civilization 4? That's pick up and play. Whatever. Something like that. MMOs require a certain investment of time when playing with other people. And instances require other people. Simple. So I don't view time as an excuse either. So, what is it? Skill? Well, to be honest, skill in WoW can be learned. When dealing with raid encounters, you are dealing with the theory behind it. You need to know the theory behind your class and the theory behind raiding in general. You see the boss, you know the boss is going to do certain things. You need to know the theories behind aggro generation and threat. You need to know the theories behind the optimum way to do damage, to do heal, to tank, if you're tanking. You need to know the fact that bosses have a certain number of abilities, and often a lot of them consist of don't stand in the fire. You need to know the theory behind that. You need to know the theory about moving, the optimum positions, things like that. Now, this might sound a bit complicated, but there are so many resources available online to see it that it becomes a non-issue. You go watch the videos at tankspot.com. You can also go watch some of Boss Killers, some of which are okay. They're called talk-throughs. They're not great in places, I must say. The audio quality is particularly poor, and the narration varies in quality depending on who's doing it. But if you can watch it and you can tolerate it, then they're really helpful. And of course, there's the guides on Boss Killers as well, which are very, very thorough. So the information's there, and if you need to work out things like theory, well, you can look at Ra, you can look at EJ. They have a lot of information about that kind of thing, a lot of guides there. Even the Something Awful MMO forums have quite a lot. You can also look at WoW Wiki, and if you're really desperate, go read the class guides on the forums. Both the US and EU forums, class-specific, all have guides for playing your class correctly. And woe betide that you actually have a look at your character in-game and work it out for yourself. So that's not really an excuse either, is it? So what is the excuse? There isn't one. Practice makes perfect. Now here's the issue with this raid-wide buff. If you have a raid-wide buff that constantly gets bigger and bigger and bigger, then all you are teaching people is that all they need to do is wait for the goalposts to be moved sufficiently in order to kick their ball through. Moving the goalpost sucks. There was in fact, a continued scandal in the UK education system regarding the movement of goalposts. More and more children were getting A's. So the logical conclusion for some people was, well, the exams must be getting easier. Now, this is possible, of course. And it's possible that, hey, more children are getting A's. But if you are grading them so easily, and you are grading them so in such a lax manner, then you're going to run into problems. Because if you're not being honest with people, and not saying, right, this is your current level of capability and knowledge, and this is what you're going to have to do to get better at it, rather than saying, well, we're just going to move the goalposts a bit, so now your B becomes an A, now your C becomes a B. They're not going to learn anything from that. That doesn't suddenly make them automatically smarter, and in fact, if that keeps happening, it gets worse. It's encouragement of behavior that is non-optimal. It is encouragement of behavior that is not living up to the potential of the person. This applies to WoW as well. If all you have to do is wait, then you're not going to learn anything. It's the same with them just handing out gear willy-nilly. You saw it with Sunwell. You saw it with all of the raids around there. It was a double whammy of disillusionment right there. They nerfed everything by 30% and also gave you access to gear that, quite frankly, you should not have had. So, with this pincer attack of entitled casual-friendly nonsense, you ended up encouraging an entitled attitude that has lasted all the way up to now. You spawned a horrible, horrible demon, and you haven't been able to cast it back into the netherworld. You can't keep doing that, because your players aren't going to get better. They, if anything, will simply maintain their level of skill, and they may get worse. That's the really bad thing. If you constantly overgear them for fights, and you constantly provide them with buffs and help and all sorts of things, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you need to do that? People get better all the time. They get better by learning. They get better by practicing. That is the only buff they need. They self-buff themselves. It's horribly nerdy, but they do. They gain knowledge, they gain skill and ability. When any player, and I do mean any player, first tries an encounter, they're generally a headless chicken. They make stupid mistakes. I know we did. We're just getting to the point where we're not making stupid mistakes on the stuff in that wing. But you know what? We're getting better as a result of it. And yeah, we're going to eat the wipes. It's our fault. We have to learn from that. We have to accept. And you've seen the excuses and the apologism. What did I just talk about 15 minutes ago where this guy's like, oh, man, yeah, making excuses unfair, blah, blah, blah. This is what the lengths people will go to if you pander to that entitled nature. Like, it's unfair, blah, blah, blah. You know, you should be nerfing it, not buffing it, even though it's a fix. That's how people view it. That's how entitled people view it. You can't give in to those people, because you just end up ruining the raid for everyone else. And they'll never learn. Now, if you want to put out really great raid content, and if you want to utilize your dungeon design team to the fullest and make bosses that are complex, challenging, and interesting, then you have to stop with the pandering. You can't make really great, interesting, challenging bosses and simultaneously nerf them into the floor. It doesn't work. I'm sure your dungeon designers are kind of annoyed by that, and I'm pretty sure it's not the dungeon designers who are making that call. They would like everything to be Algernon level strength, I would imagine. They would like to make encounters where only perfection will suffice. They're not able to. They have to dumb it down to some level, and I accept that. Not everyone is going to be able to kill Algernon. Not everyone has the motivation. Not everyone's going to be able to kill Heroic Anubarak. Not everyone is going to be able to do hard modes in this. Not everyone is going to be able to kill Putricide. And that is fine. They can have a crack at it, but that's it. And if they're good enough, they get to beat it. That's the only requirement for entry. It's the only barrier to them. It's why I supported the removal of attunements in the first place. Remove every barrier other than the player's personal skill and the skill of their raid. That should be the only determining factor. I still believe that. I do not believe that the goalpost should be moved. They'll never learn. They'll never learn that way. And what will happen? You'll get through to Cataclysm and you'll have the same problem. It's too hard. Subscriptions. $15 a month. Blah, blah, blah. Populist nonsense. Apologism. Bleeding hearts. Swarming. And you put in the AoE cap so I can't kill them all. How terrible you are. Now, yeah, it's nice that you can turn it off. But what I'm going to be asking in the next segment is, should you? And this is coming from someone who's in it for the challenge. Could you turn that off? Could you face it? Would your raid agree to it? Is it even a viable option? And indeed, where do we draw the line between having a challenge and common sense, and indeed the use of the tools available to you? We'll be talking about that after the break, folks. You're listening to Blue Please on WoW Radio. If you've got topics for the illusion of choice, you can email them in to themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. With your choice of topic, your choice of potion, poison, whichever you prefer. I will be right back after this. Enjoy.